Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss The Nice Guys, starring Russell Crowe, Ryan Gosling, Angourie Rice, Margaret Qualley, and Kim Basinger, directed by Shane Black. Now, before I get into this, I have reviewed every directed Shane Black movie from Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which I did last time, Iron Man 3 when I did The Avengers. I'm now doing this one, and I did his last Predator film, not the one with Schwarzenegger, but the one without Schwarzenegger, where he directed it, called The Predator, which terrible film from what I remember. And how do I like this one? Well, let's get into it and find out. We open in a house in Los Angeles in the year 1977 where a little boy is letting the dog out to do its business, I'll say at best. And after a hand sneaks into his parents' room to steal a pornography magazine, and on the magazine? The woman who gets killed named Misty Mountains, as she gets into a car crash and dies while crashing into the little boy's house. And this opening sequence sets up the plot very well, as this is director Shane Black at his best. And we move on to a commercial about towels being shown in school as a teenage girl is taken by some pot smokers' house while Jackson Healy, played by Russell Crowe, beats up on the pot smoker who tells him to stay away from teenage girls. As we move on to Holland March, played by Ryan Gosling, in the bathtub, as his daughter Holly, played by Angourie Rice from the Spider-Man Tom Holland years, in the MCU anyways, calls him on the phone as Holland, not Holly, but Holland is a private investigator who seems weirdly terrible at his job, but he's just a funny character, while Jackson talks with Amelia Kuttner, played in an early role by Margaret Qualley, who's Andy McDowell's daughter. And I reviewed her before in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Yorgos Lanthimos' Poor Things and Kinds of Kindness, and I'll be reviewing her again soon in The Substance. As Holland, asks around for Amelia as he breaks into a bar with a lot of blood out of him. And I really like following Jackson and Holland as characters, despite I'm not a Ryan Gosling fan in general, as I reviewed him before in other movies like Barbie. And I thought about doing The Notebook, but I watched it recently and I'm thinking, what is the appeal of this? But I'll maybe do it next year. Who knows? Jackson wakes up for the day and he thinks about the divorce he had with his ex-wife and goes out to Holland's house and beats the shit out of him, as well as breaking his arm, while telling him the message to stop looking for Amelia, and that must have fucking hurt so damn badly, as Holland screams like a little girl. And it sounds painful, but I actually laughed out loud as it was cracking me up the way he screamed like a little girl. Excuse me for saying that, but it's unfortunately true. Until Holly gets home, and nighttime comes, and Jackson comes home and gets attacked by some bad men that paint gets on one of their faces of one of the bad men, throwing his fish at Jackson, which is interesting. While Holland quits the client who wants him Mrs. Glenn, by the way, to look for Amelia, aka her granddaughter, as he even regrets while she offers more money, but he doesn't take it, and he kept his word. While the scene with Holland and Mrs. Glenn was also interesting while his neighbor gets killed. And as this is an interesting movie, Holly has a birthday party at the bowling alley while he takes the Lord's name in vain and has a license to carry his gun around, while Jackson approaches him while Holland is in the toilet and requests Holland to help him look for Amelia. And eventually Holly comes in and asks if he can beat up her friend Janet while she annoys her. And at one point she annoyed the shit out of Holland and taking the Lord's name in vain a couple of minutes ago. And I like the charisma, as partners in private investigation. And Jackson pays Holland to help find Amelia in 2 days for $400. And they begin in front of the courthouse as the people there pretend to be dead as a protest about the air for the birds, and look for Amelia as they offer one of them $20 to find Amelia at her boyfriend's house who died in a fire, named Chet. And the guy who shows them the burnt house of Amelia's boyfriend, Dean, as he died. And the plot is entertaining me, as this is a very entertaining movie from start to finish, but not quite as good as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, in my opinion. Jackson and Holland pay a kid $20 for answers about if he knew Dean, and he gives him answers like he knew him in which was believable while asking if they want to see his dick, which is so disturbing in so many levels, and finds out a name called Shattuck. I don't know if I'm saying the name wrong. Please forgive me. As they get to Holland's house, and he makes a call to Sid, and their next stop is at a party with porn actresses in the party, as Holly is forced to go to a friend's house as she ends up in the trunk out of the blue, and she enters the party, and Angry Race does a good job playing a child character with experience in these types of situations, which is fucked up of Holland to make her do so, while they get in the party and call Holly a taxi cab, and the cinematography felt very 1970s, which of Los Angeles, and I like that about the movie as it has the 1970s feeling. Jackson finds Holly at the party watching a porno, which doesn't feel right for a little girl to do so, while Holland is pretending to be an actor, while someone dressed like Pocahontas shooting Holland off the ledge, and he sees Amelia hiding in the bushes while the motherfucker was drunk, and she runs over, and how the fuck is he a private investigator while Jackson looks for Holland, as Holland sees a dead body right next to him, and calls Jackson and shows him the dead body, which happens to belong to Sid, played by an uncredited role by Robert Downey Jr., as Holly looks around for Amelia, and some woman takes her to Amelia in the car, while Jackson and Holland carry the dead body to a wedding party. And they get back there as Jackson gets into a fight with one of the bad men, being played by Keith David, of all people, as Holly finds Amelia and runs out of the car and goes with her as Holland goes after Holly and Amelia as he knocked out Keith David. Jackson does, I mean. As he says he'll be in Michigan, and the action sequences were convincing to me. Holland tries to drive the car and can't make one move. Well, he can't move, while one of the bad men gets ran over and injured as he's still alive, surprisingly. And Jackson ends up coming in, and Holland comes in, as does the cops, and Tally, who comes in with Amelia's mother, Judith, played by Kim Basinger, and takes them to a meeting with her. But something that didn't remind you, she's a lawyer, taking a case to poison the air and kill the birds from earlier in the movie. As Amelia joins the protesters earlier in the film, and this plot is connecting quite terrifically in my opinion, while Judith wants to hire Jackson and Holland, and they accept $5,000 as Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling make a great team. Despite, like I said before, I'm not a Ryan Gosling fan, but I just find the guy to be a little ignorant. Too ignorant, I'll say, based on what I've seen him in interviews. Jackson explains he was in a violent situation with a robber with a shotgun in a diner and killed that motherfucker's ass until Holland falls asleep, and Jackson leaves the house and sees Holly in the park where their house was until the fire happened, and Jackson leaves her to it as the next day Holly drives the car with Holland as the passenger, which it amazes me how Holly could drive at her age, which I think she was, 13, 14 years old, something like that, maybe 11, I could be wrong. And they see Jackson at the house while they come home late because Holland was at a bar, and Holly yells at Holland about why he's all fucked up until he says where Amelia might be, either in an apartment or at the Burbank Airport Hotel. And they go there without Holly this time, and they see the apartment has been gone for 2 years. And they get to the airport, which is a building, and asks a bartender where Amelia is at. She meets with someone by the name John Boy, and this is actually turning into a smart and funny movie, in my opinion. Excuse me. Jackson and Holland get in the elevator and see someone has been shot dead, and get back in the elevator while a guy is thrown out the window, and Holland looks like he was going to vomit, which was very funny. While they drive away, and Amelia happens to jump on the car and bringing her to Holland's house, as Holly and her friend Jessica being there, as they were kicked out of her house, Jessica's house, I mean, because her sister has a guy over, and they ask her questions, and by definition, they ask Amelia questions about her mother being up to something, as she's a criminal, and Amelia is acting very harsh about the situation, as she made a film about her mother being a criminal, and she said Judith is the one who killed Sid, Misty as Amelia's boyfriend, I forgot his name now, and Tally calls Holland saying Judith is up to something suspicious, and she asks Holland and Jackson to come by the house and to get some money in a briefcase when they see the family doctor, and I'm believing she was bullshitting around as she's up to something not very good, as that was a little predictable. Just a little bit, not too much. But this is a minor nitpick. And I like the character Margaret Qualley plays in this movie, as she turns in some good work. Holland falls asleep as he makes the car drive itself, which was a fucking dream. And they wake up and they see they don't have the money while it's fake, as Holland tries to call the house, but Jessica is on the phone, and I'm thinking, Jessica, get off the fucking phone! Well, a bad guy comes in the house, and Holly points a gun at the bad guy, as she knows it's him, while Holland and Jackson gets home, and Jessica is thrown out of the fucking window as they hear it and have a firearm fight with the bad guy, while Amelia keeps running away, which kind of annoys me, as she gets out of the house while the firearm fight continues until the bad guy hears the cops coming and drives away and bumps into Amelia and shoots her dead, and they failed the mission to protecting Amelia in the gunfire sequence, or fight sequence, was pretty spectacular, while they lose the case and take a taxi cab. And this movie is working for a buddy detective film. Mrs. Glenn talks with Holland about how she saw Amelia with a jacket on at Misty's house, clear as day, as they discover Mrs. Glenn saw Amelia in the movie because Misty was viewing the film for the distributors, but they learned they have the premiere of the movie at the auto show in Los Angeles, and tells Mrs. Glenn Amelia is dead, but Holly is with them, saying, "We will catch the guys who did it." And they get there and get to the projection room until Tally comes in and points the gun at the two dimwit idiots. And Holly comes in and throws cold coffee at Tally. And she slips on the ground, Tally does, and gets killed by the coffee on the ground. And they look for Chet, the projectionist, while Holland gets drunk and acting like an imbecile. Jackson finds Chet in the garbage, which was clever for damn sure. The movie starts in the background while Keith David takes Holland and Holly to the roof, and Holland tells Holly to duck, as she does, and Holland and Keith David jump off the roof, and Keith David is dead, while Holland gets in the pool and catches up with Jackson, while Holly fights Tally, who was alive the entire time, as Holly throws the film out the window, and Holland grabs it while Jackson fights the bad guys off and gets shot in the arm, as Holland was shot and is still alive, and he believes he's invincible, as Holland gets the film while Jackson almost kills the bad guy by choking him out. But one thing, Holly tells him that he will never speak to Jackson again, and she ends up saving the bad guy's life, and they won the fight, as the cops arrive and they get to the courtroom with Judith, and she talks with Holland and Jackson as she's going to jail for killing the birds, as Holland sees Jackson is drinking again because he wasn't drinking alcohol, but Judith getting away with it with a slap on the wrist, and make a business of their own called the Nice Guys Agency, and got their first case with a woman whose husband is sleeping with Wonder Woman, aka Linda Carter. And the climax works great, as this movie was very good, but what will I rate it? Let's get to it and we'll see. I'll give this movie a 8.0 out of 10. I really liked the characters, as they were fun to follow the movie throughout, as the plot was a hell of a lot of fun. And this is Shane Black making a story at its best, despite it's not quite as good as Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, but Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling are a great team together. Despite I'm not a Ryan Gosling fan, as I find the guy very ignorant in general based on the interviews I've seen him in, but the action scenes were convincing in my opinion. It takes a while for the plot to get connected, as it works terrifically by the end of the day, in my opinion, as the cinematography felt like Los Angeles back in the 1970s, as I wasn't alive back then, but I can sense it from that way. It's shot as it works, while Angry Race does a good job playing a kid, where she went through some fucked up things, as she pulls that off great. And Margaret Qualley will be discussing in The Substance for Oscar bait purposes, but she does a good job portraying the character who's afraid to get killed. And she turned in some good work in this movie. This was a very entertaining movie, as I was entertained from start to finish, as it was smart and funny in a haha kind of way, as it was clever. And this is a solid recommendation for this movie, as it was a very good time, as I had fun and entertaining time with it. So I tell people who haven't seen this movie yet, or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, to go check both of them out. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for the Shane Black directorial debut, let's say, for now. And until he gets another one, goodbye, 1970s.